You are sitting in your room with your lights off when your mom suddenly walks in and turns on the lights. You can see your mom now perfectly, but how did your eyes process that image of your mom and send it to your brain?
Light enters the eye through the pupil, the small adjustable opening that lets light into the eye. The cornea, which is the protective layer of the eye, bends light to provide focus. Muscles found behind the iris, the colored muscle that relaxes or contracts in response to light and even emotion, squeeze or stretch the lens, which is found behind the pupil and focuses light rays and projects them onto the retina toward the back of the eye. The process of engaging or bending of the lens to focus near or far objects on the retina is known as accommodation. The retina is the thin inner surface of the back of the eye that houses rods and cones.
On the retina, rods are the photoreceptors that enable black and white vision and detect white, gray, and black. The retina also has cones, which are photoreceptors, but they detect fine detail and color in daylight or bright light. The light focused on the retina hits at the fovea, which is a small depression in the center of the retina where visual acuity is the highest because it has the highest density of cone receptors. When rods and cones are stimulated, they trigger chemical changes that spark neural signals or messages which are sent to the optic nerve, which is activated by the receptor cells and sends sensory information from the light to the brain for processing. Then the cells behind them are activated, called bipolar cells. Bipolar cells are specialized cells that connect and transmit information from the eye's photoreceptors, which include the rods and cones, to the ganglion cells, which make up the optic nerve. The bipolar cells turn on the ganglion cells, which are the neighboring cells that receive information from the bipolar cells and transmit it to the brain for processing. The optic nerve sends the impulses to the brain. In the brain, it first travels to the thalamus, which receives almost all incoming sensory information, organizes it, and relays it to the cortex. The thalamus sends the information to the visual cortex, which is located in the occipital lobe and is part of the cerebral cortex that is involved in vision. The occipital lobe is responsible for processing and responding to visual stimuli. The cortex has specialized nerve cells called feature detectors, which are cortical neurons in the brain that respond to specific features of the stimulus such as shape, angle, or movement. In the brain, the right cortex processes information from the left eye and vice versa. The optic chiasma is the point where the optic nerve fibers from each eye cross over one another. In vision, there is something called a blind spot, which is the point at which the optic nerve leaves the eye. This creates a blind spot because there are no receptor cells located here. The brain will normally fill in this gap automatically, though, so we assume that the world continues and we are not aware that a blind spot exists in the middle of our vision. There are two prevailing theories that describe how color vision works. First is the trichromatic theory that states that the retina contains 3 different color receptors, one the most sensitive to red, one to green, and one to blue. When stimulated in combination, these produce the perception of color. The other prevailing theory is known as the opponent process theory, which states that the opposing retinal processes, such as red-green, yellow-blue, and white-black, enable color vision.